Peak fiction is a term commonly used to describe how great a piece of media is, whether it's a book, movie, or any form of entertainment with the purpose of telling a story. I hear it most commonly used for video games. Everyone has their own deciding factors for what peak fiction is. For some, it's a long, detailed, and brutally realistic story-driven game about a group of characters. Or a quicker, more lenient story that might hit closer to home with the player. Personally, my distinction is when a story actively pushes one narrative to the point that it impacts me as a person. Unfortunately, as I grow older, video game narratives rarely affect me as much. But I would be lying if I didn't say one series changed that. In recent years, I've been very focused on playing a lot more RPGs. Final Fantasy, Fire Emblem, Yakuza, and plenty more. One series that always had my interest more than others was Xenoblade Chronicles. Like a lot of people, I found this series because of Shulk's inclusion in Smash Bros. I distinctly remember coming home from school one day and watching his reveal trailer, calmly thinking, "What the fuck, another Fire Emblem character?" Before that point, I had no idea what a Xenoblade was. In another timeline, there's a chance I would never know what Xenoblade was if it wasn't for Operation Rainfall, that being a fan-organized campaign to petition 3 Nintendo RPGs ported to North America: The Last Story, Pandora's Tower, and Xenoblade Chronicles. Long story short, the campaign was successful, and each game was eventually released in North America. It's amazing to think how a series that might have never been localized turned out to be worthy of being nominated for Game of the Year. I fully believe this series holds some of the most interesting characters and deeply written stories out of any Nintendo game. Although I haven't played Pikmin 4 yet, so I might be wrong.
Long ago, the world was nothing more than an endless sea, cloaked in a boundless sky, reaching as far as could possibly be imagined. Then 2 great titans came into existence, the Bionis and the Mechonis. The Titans were locked in a timeless battle. Until at last, only their lifeless corpses remained.
Each Xenoblade entry opens with a small movie detailing the in-game world. In this case, we're introduced to the original focus behind Xeno 1's world. The idea that the world you explore and come to love is actually 2 gigantic, lifeless corpses surrounded by nothing but an endless ocean? I'm sold! A dense forest with large waterfalls located on the back, compared to the illuminated Satoral marsh near its waist. Mechonis is the complete opposite though, acting as a giant mechanical factory. With how much there is to this world, it's hard to remember that Xenoblade was originally a Wii game, and eventually a 3DS game. How the hell did they do that? Ugh! What the... Ugh! Putting whatever that was aside, the Xenoblade series excels at combining their intricate stories and tying it together with their complex narratives. Yes, I did just shove buzzwords together with zero meaning. What I'm saying is, the overall meaning behind the story, and the way they presented it, is why I would call this game peak fiction. The Monado. Arguably one of the most distinctive designs ever for a sword. But more importantly, it's the key... fuck, never mind. It's essential to Xenoblade's whole story. Even when you don't think it has connections to something, I promise you, it does. In a lot of games, I feel like swords are just there to simply be a weapon. Even when they do hold some plot significance, the importance behind it feels lost until the end. But from start to finish, the Monado is crucial, and I really like that. Tying the general theme of your games around an object, let alone one you see 24/7, makes it feel important. In this case, the series usually ties them to the protagonist's swords. It's almost like this is a Xenoblade Chronicles. I suppose it's just that I really enjoyed knowing the whole game that the sword I'm using holds a deeper meaning yet to be explained. It leaves me wondering what the mystery is, what secrets it holds. I am Shulk. I want to tinker with the Monado and learn how it's connected to the game's theme. Speaking of, I've yet to even mention what the general theme is.
Do you wish to change it?
Huh?
The future.
Wanting to change the future is a message that shines brightly in the first game. From the very moment we first get control of a character, it's all about fighting for your future. Granted, I've experienced a lot of amazing stories through video games. Some I would even say are on par or better than what Xenoblade can offer. Final Fantasy VII is a classic example about saving the planet, and trust me, I sure as hell don't want ours to die. Tales of Arise 2, not being that far off of Xenoblade's general theming. Fighting for your future, or for what you believe in, is a common trope in most stories. Xenoblade just took that and made it the front-running narrative, while also physically adding it into the world through the Monado. It takes what could have been a plain revenge plot against the Mechon to an intricate story with a clear message. But more importantly, it genuinely made me realize that yeah, the future really isn't written, and what I do with that is in my hands. No other video game has really left that much of a lasting impact before. That right there is what I deem as peak fiction. A story that not only kept me entertained and interested, but one that personally affected me. But it'd be wrong to just end there, as Xenoblade isn't even my personal favorite in the series. Rather, the end lies ahead. Ah, see what I fucking did there? The opening cutscene to this game differs from the previous game as there's no narration during it. It fulfills the simple, common rule of show, don't tell, focusing on the world itself rather than a specific point. If anything, I wouldn't even say the opening cutscene gives the world justice to how vast it is. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The second cutscene gives the player some much-needed context.
An entire horizon of white. A sea of clouds. And at its heart, the world tree, piercing the heavens. This is the world we call home. Allrest. Story goes that when the world was young, everyone in Allrest lived on the tree, together with our divine father, the architect.
While in the first game, everyone on Bionis is prospering on a giant husk, here in Allrest, there is no other form of land besides the living titans. Once they all die out, it's nothing but a blanket of clouds for miles. Though the whole game, you can see what is supposed to be this sacred land where everyone has been banished from, the World Tree. Now, the reason I start this by mentioning the world of Xenoblade 2 is because the game spends a lot of time flourishing the locales around you. Truthfully, it's the most fantasy-based world I've experienced. The purple and blue foliage that bloom in the belly of a beast, or the archipelago of strangely shaped floating islands, all surrounded by the Cloud Sea. Even the general cities range drastically too, like how Alba Kavannik is very steampunk-esque, and the Kingdom of Tantel is made of crumbling ruins. This series, and especially Xenoblade 2 specifically, supply worlds I've never thought of exploring before. I absolutely love the idea of a cloud sea blanketing the entire world, but still acting like a body of water. That these land masses aren't just ground beneath our feet, but living and sometimes talking beings. Every area has its story to tell, and it makes this world feel alive. Established in the first game, a blade is being used as the main motivation to unravel this story as well. Albeit the term blade has a much different meaning in this game that I sure as hell don't feel like explaining. Now we have the Aegis and Pyra for our whole journey. Xenoblade 2 differs from the first game's general theming. The first game was a story about changing the future and creating a world with no higher being ruling over. This game, however, is about finding the way forward, even through the toughest of times. It's a very subtle change that drastically changes the way characters act and how situations play out. Each character we meet has their own reasons to push through to the end, but all are brought together through the bond Rex and Pyra hold. Rex himself is a young protagonist, which plays mostly to his disadvantage. But with his age comes a different mindset to how most people would take situations. He's very heart-driven, even when things are tough, and with the help of his friends, always finds the motivation to push forward. Pyra, on the other hand, is very caring for everyone around her, and being paired with Mithra, who is more rash and careless with her actions. Not to mention every other main character and side character that I can't properly give justice to. All of them impact Rex for the better. The way this game builds its world into feeling like a real, lived-in space. The way it has every character's growth impact another throughout the story. And the overall story that's being told is what I would absolutely say is the best story I have experienced in a video game. Xenoblade 2 is my favorite game in the series, story-wise. I might even go as far to say it's my favorite game, period. After finishing both games, I immediately became a big fan of the series. I'm still a novice at making this form of content, so apologies if I'm just pointing out basic storytelling elements. It's difficult to say why this series is so special to me, as it has been a couple years since I played these two. Though I do believe there's still one more to cover. The opening movie to Xenoblade 3 is by far the most interesting one since, at first glance, it doesn't leave a lot of answers. But the importance of this moment rings throughout the game itself. Akin to Xenoblade 2, it's not until the second cutscene where more info about the world we're diving into is shared.
Fighting in order to live, and living to fight. That's the way of our world. Ionios.
Amidst the battlefield, Ionios is the grounds for a never-ending war. Not for economic reasons or territorial reasons, but because killing is simply their way of life. From the moment you're alive, you are fighting. Starting in a very similar fashion to the first game's tutorial, but something about the way 3 handled it felt a lot more impactful immediately. Maybe watching corpses hit the ground and seeing them get drained of their life had something to do with it, but what do I know? Right away, Xenoblade 3 lets us know that this world doesn't work the same way we'd expect, more specifically with how the characters act. If there's one thing that never fully caught my interest in this series, it was the characters themselves, and I was never really sure why. The first 2 games did have memorable casts, but I just never felt a connection with anyone, like other role-playing games. Granted, that is more than likely just a me problem. Xenoblade 3, however, each character felt like they were always showing off their charm. All of them feel different from the last, not to mention you start the game off with the full main cast already. Most other games would have you progress in the story and pick up characters along the way, but Xenoblade hands you 6 immediately, with an optional 7th placement to fill as you play. The whole story revolves around this gang of opposing military troops being forced to make their own third side against their original factions, watching them go from enemies to apathetic comrades, and finally friends working together. Each character gets their spotlight now. Some games might just want to focus on the protag and whatever love interests are written alongside them. And while that is definitely a focus here too, every character gets time to shine. I can very distinctly remember multiple suspenseful and heartfelt moments with every character, and that's a feat that I wouldn't say is easy to do.
What's that in aid of?
Do the right thing. Come on.
What? Sorry, but I refuse to debase myself like this.
I never skipped a single cutscene because I wanted to see how each character acted at any given moment, even the small ones. Noah and Mio's deep connection unfolded throughout the whole game, Lanz and Senna being the most energetic and funny duo, and of course, Uni and Taion being a weirdly unlikely pair that grow on each other more and more. I definitely have my favorite characters across the series, but I would say they get more odd the further we go. I mean, hell, I just spent this whole time talking about this game's main cast, but my favorite character is Juniper. I couldn't begin to explain why, either. Of course, though, it wouldn't be right to talk about a Xenoblade game without mentioning the most defining factor. This game's world is a combination of the first 2 games, and it shockingly isn't just done for the sake of fan service. I couldn't imagine what it's like playing 3 without any knowledge of the first 2 games. Walking around this always expanding world, seeing locales from both games, it was borderline impossible to go an hour of playing and not come to the realization, oh shit, wait, I've been here before! It took the grandiose open areas I loved from Xenoblade 1 and combined them with the expanding stories and details from Xenoblade 2 to create one of the most memorable worlds I've experienced. Running through Makta Wildwood and seeing the aspects of both Makna Forest and Moritha Ruins combined, or Milo Meadows taking components from Gar Plains and Gormott, it's just, this game is so amazing, man! I would absolutely say Xenoblade 3 is the best crafted game in the series, even if Xenoblade 2 is my personal favorite. Granted, I mostly like Xeno 3 for its gameplay, but I'm not reviewing the games. I'm simply discussing the meaning of peak fiction, and gameplay does not count towards that, in my opinion. I was ecstatic to see it get nominated for Game of the Year, and I think that alone was an achievement to many Xenoblade fans. However, we did get completely snubbed out of Best Original Soundtrack, and I will 100% stand by that. Also, completely unrelated, why the fuck was Sonic Frontiers not nominated for that? Are you insane? God damn you, Jeff Keighley! Xenoblade Chronicles is easily one of the best video game series I have experienced. From the very moment I picked up the first game 4 years ago, I felt like there was something special to it. 30 hours later, after the main story, I immediately bought the second game because I was already that invested. From there, I proceeded to play Xenoblade 2 twice. 2 playthroughs, one right after the other. And of course, just waited until the third and final game release to play that. As much as I would like to critically review each game like I'm some kind of video game genius, I know a lot of it would just boil down to me saying the same key points. Rather than discussing what the series gameplay does right and wrong, or how amazing the soundtracks are, or other major attributes, it's the stories these games told that I hold in high regard. So I wanted to focus on just that. Granted, there is a lot more I could have talked about. I didn't even mention all the weird moments from 2. While I don't really like those parts either, I'd be lying if I said they changed my perspective on the game as a whole. Nor did I take the time to talk about any of the DLC, mostly because I only care about one of them, but still. It's more than simple storytelling. It's more than just showcasing character growth, more than an ever-expanding world. It is simply something bigger than all of that, in which my words cannot justify a proper explanation. And for that, I would say Xenoblade Chronicles is what I consider to be peak fiction. Hey, hope you enjoyed the video. I'm still getting used to making this kind of content, but I'm very excited to say I have more similar videos planned in the near future. If you liked the video, I'd greatly appreciate sharing it around with anyone you think might like it too. I'm simply just rambling words onto a Google Doc and editing them into a video really, but seeing them perform well really motivates me. Until my next one, thanks. Hi. I'm Glorious Cashew. I was the narrator of this video. Sometimes I make videos on a collaborative channel called Mental Hole with Maximinium and Kerbo and some other people. That's really awesome. You should check that out. Also, I make videos sometimes on my own channel, very rarely, but that's mostly just me speedrunning Levelhead. Okay, bye.